Thanks, Joe. Thanks for the invite. And I have to say, I'm really impressed with the event so far. Very impressive people that I've met, and also really impressive speakers. One thing that really impressed me is everyone's walking around down front, no notes, anything like that, which is what I would like to do. But I did just fly in from Beijing, so my time is now 5:45 a.m., and I'm on a lot of caffeine. And when I do this time shift, my short-term memory is gone. So there's got to be some medical aspect to this, but I'm going to use a couple notes, so thanks for indulging me. So China. Why China? So China is the largest country in the world, 1.3 plus billion, larger than India. It's now the second largest medical device market in the world, just behind the US, expected to exceed the US by, I think, 2020, if I understand that correctly. Why am I in China? So I'm an American. I've been in China since 2006. And the questions that I get are typically, how did I get there? Why am I there? Do I like it there? Interestingly enough, people always ask me if my wife is Chinese. And what about the pollution? How do you live in that? So why am I there? I'll spend some time talking about. Do I like it? I love it. I have 3 young daughters who are bilingual, who are growing up as international kids. We have a very good lifestyle. It's an exciting and dynamic place. My wife is not Chinese. She's a Midwesterner who's quite adventurous. And the pollution is bad. There are days when kids don't go outside to play and they stay inside in highly filtered air. And that's a real downside. But the Chinese government is actually making positive progress. And for the 10 years we've been there, it's gotten better every year. And this year in particular has been really nice. We don't actually want a lot of people to know that because we think more people will come. But right now it's really nice. So why am I in China? How did I get there? I always envisioned living overseas with my family, but I kind of in my mind envisioned Italy or something like that. But this was just an opportunity. I had a friend. It was a classmate of mine from undergrad. I went to West Point. He was one of my best friends from West Point. And he had started a healthcare-related company in Beijing. And I was talking to him about it, and he invited me over there. So I made my first trip in 2006. And I was interested in his business plan. I thought it was really fascinating. Didn't know anything about China. I had some images in my mind. I got there, it wasn't what I expected. It was fast-paced, it was exciting, lots of change. And he had somehow attracted a board of advisors, which included 2 very influential gentlemen. One was the former Secretary of State, General Alexander Haig, who was also a West Point grad, and I had the opportunity to spend time with him there in China. And the other one is a person called the Honorable Maurice Strong, both of which have passed away, but they were quite active at the time. And he was known as the International Man of Mystery. If you Google International Man of Mystery, you actually get Austin Powers. But if you Google the International Man of Mystery UN, so United Nations, you get Maurice Strong. And it's from an article that was done in 2008 by the Wall Street Journal. He was an undersecretary under Kofi Annan. So very interesting senior statesman. And so I was hooked. I went in 2006, June, and I decided I was going to go to China. I helped raise a little bit more friends and family investment money. We had raised about $3.5 million, and I took the job. And I thought I could do it from Northern California. I'm from the Bay Area. I was living in Menlo Park. And I would fly to Beijing for about 2 weeks, then fly back to Menlo Park for about 3 weeks, then fly to China for 2 weeks, then back. And it got to the point with 2 young daughters at the time, they were 1 and 3, they started pretending like I wasn't their dad. So it was apparent that that was not possible to do business from the US in China. So my wife said, let's move there. So we picked up our 2 young daughters. In 2007, April 4th, we arrived. In hindsight, it would have been really ironic if we arrived April 1st. because we thought we were coming for 2 or 3 years, and it's been 10 years now. But we arrived with nothing but our bags, and I started working full-time, heads down, for 18 months. We built a healthcare exchange connecting U.S. medical device companies to Chinese institutions, to hospitals, connecting to the healthcare providers. We did some excellent work, but deep in 2008, we hadn't built a sustainable business model. We ran out of capital, and funding had completely dried up. So I'm in China, 2008. Now I have 3 young daughters. We just had a new one. So they're 6, just turned 6, just turned 4, and 1. I have no job. I have no income. I'm in China. Unfulfilled personally, unfulfilled professionally, and I didn't know what to do. So I lifted my head up. I started talking to my China contacts. There was 2 people in particular that gave me really interesting advice. The first one, named Lisa, she said, kind of Star Wars Yoda-like, she said, meet every breakfast, lunch, and dinner with a Chinese person that you know or get connected to for 2 months, and you'll know what you will do. I thought, that's strange. And another person I talked to, a guy named Fritz, he was a very successful entrepreneur. He said, look, you have domain expertise in medical devices. You're the only American sitting in Beijing with domain expertise. Go deep, learn everything you can about it, and be that guy that is the go-to guy for medical devices from the US. So I took their advice, and interestingly enough, it was about 2 months I decided what I was going to do. So at the beginning of 2009, I started China MedConnect. We support US medical device companies in a variety of capacities in the China market. We've been kind of right place, right time. We were very fortunate, but we've been doing that for 8 years now, just over 8 years, and we continue to do what we're doing, and it's a great time to be there. So I became what I would call a accidental China entrepreneur. Never had plans to be one, but that's what happened. So, sorry, short-term memory. Question for everyone. Has anyone lived in China? Hands up if you've lived in China. At least one person I know. 2, okay. Visited China more than 10 times. Okay. Considered old hands. 5 times? More than 5 times? Okay, same. More, visited at least once. Okay, good. Okay, so if you've been to China, that's good because you have some firsthand knowledge. If you haven't been to China, you still have some knowledge. You gained it from conversations with other people, their preconceived notions, you got it from the news, but everyone has ideas about China. So I'm gonna share some of my learnings and some of my insights, and you may disagree with me. That's okay. If you disagree, call me out, we can discuss it, and then everyone can learn from it. But I'm gonna go through some of the considerations or insights that I have, and following that, we'll open it up to question and answer so people can call me out on anything that I've said that they don't agree with, or they take, they have a complaint about because they've got a different experience, and that'll be great. So, 10 years, by the way, I think is valuable. It's not 20 years, it's not 25. 10 years is valuable. But it's not just the time on the ground and the firsthand experience, it's also recency of time in China. So if you visited China 5 years ago in the medical device space, and you visit China today in the medical device space, they're not the same. So relevance in time, so proximity to now is really important. So I'm gonna go over now considerations. So China's 1.3 billion people. That doesn't mean it's a good market for your device. The back of the napkin, 1.3, I can get 1%, 5%, 10% of that. That doesn't matter. So if your device is really relevant to the US market, maybe to European markets, it may not be relevant for China. So the first thing we always advise doing is look at what's the real commercial opportunity for your market, what's the viability for your market. And you have to look at what's in the market right now, and where is that market going? Who are the competitors, both foreign competitors as well as domestic competitors? What are the economics of the situation? So what's the pricing that's already established in the market? And you can't generalize about this. For some products, you can get a premium in China. For others, it's going to be your most favored nation pricing in order to compete in China. And you have to look at each product as a unique product. Business plans in the US, as I understand, are typically built on reimbursement. In China, that's not the case. It's all private pay. People are paying out of pocket. Reimbursement does not factor in. There are other considerations, but they're not reimbursement. They're typically around hospital access issues, right? So by hospital access, I mean there's already an established code, which means that the hospital can pass the cost on to the patient. If you don't have a code and you don't fit into a code, the hospital cannot pass the cost on to the patient. They're not going to buy your product. So understanding whether or not you have a charge code, whether or not you've got established reimbursement, not reimbursement, you've got established bid tender pricing, so pricing that's already been put out in the market. These are the relevant factors for figuring out whether or not the economics work. Next, the regulatory path. So when I talk about changes and proximity to time and market, CFDA is really important. There have been so many changes with the CFDA over the last 5 years and more recently over the last 2 years where they've completely changed the CFDA. They've changed who administers it. They've changed the policies in terms of how you go through that process. And they're changing it on, it's got to be a daily basis, but we usually get share monthly updates at a minimum. But the changes that happened about 2 years ago, the government was not trying to make it more difficult for foreign companies in China. What they were trying to do was level the playing field between domestic Chinese medical device companies and foreign medical device companies. That's what they were trying to do. But what in actual fact the outcome was it increased the burden for foreign medical device companies. There's an increased burden for clinical trials. So even though you might have done clinical trials, even though you have your US approval and you didn't need clinical trials, in China you may. So how do you know? There is a list published by the CFDA for class 3 products which says these are clinically exempt. There's a list for class 2 products which says these are clinically exempt. Class 1 in the US and class 1 in China are not the same. But if you fit into the class 1 China, it's a self-file. It takes about a month. If you're class 2 or class 3 and you're on the exempt list, great. It'll take you about 15 to 18 months to get in the market. They don't have 510K process. If you don't fall into the clinical trial exempt list and you can't somehow avoid a clinical trial in China, we would typically say it's not worth it because it's going to take you too many years and cost too many dollars. It'll be more like a pharmaceutical registration rather than a medical device registration. Import product or domestic product? So you're a US company, you have what would typically be an imported product, and 3 years ago we would have said always be an imported product because you have a perceived quality, you've got perceived innovation, you've got perceived value. Whether you do or not, the Chinese believe the US devices are well made, well engineered, and safe. You could command a premium. Today, that landscape has changed because of different government policies and increasing quality of Chinese medical devices. We always say, make an evaluation. Should you enter the Chinese market as a domestic Chinese product or as an imported product? Because there are reasons now and policies that you may be able to take advantage of as entering as a domestic product. There's risk and negatives associated with that all. So there's pros and cons on both sides, but it needs to be evaluated. So, do you need to partner in China or do you do it by yourself? You can do either way. If you do it yourself, we would recommend working with someone who's not your distribution partner in China to hold your CFDA license. So you disintermediate that partnership. So whenever you start a partnership in China, everyone's very happy. Oftentimes, there's miscommunication, misset expectations, and then things can unravel a little bit or go a little bit south. If that happens, then you're going to want to change your distribution partner. If you haven't disintermediated the holder of your CFDA regulatory approvals from your distribution partner, you end up in a really bad situation. The first work we started doing about 8 years ago was what I'd call workout, meaning a US company's in trouble in China, help them work out the solution. I would say best 10% chance of success because it's usually gone too far south with miscommunication and misunderstanding and no longer having any trust that it's really hard to recover. So you can do it yourself. You need to do it smartly. If you want to partner, there's a spectrum of ways to partner in China. You can partner with an investor in China. You can partner with a strategic who's in your space, who dominates that space in China. You could partner with a manufacturing entity in China. You could partner with a distributor in China. Lots of different ways to do it. One of the most successful ways we've seen recently is actually joint venturing offshore, so joint venturing in Hong Kong. So you protect your assets outside of mainland China, and you have a favored tax treaty between Hong Kong and China, and you can do business offshore, but close to shore, with a partner who fall under Hong Kong rule of law, which is like British rule of law, which is quite standard. We would consider, quite, we would feel comfortable with it, as opposed to having to go to a court in China. IP protection. I can't tell you how many companies that I've talked to said, we just didn't bother protecting in China because they don't care. They'll copy anyways, they'll infringe, and we didn't want to afford it. We did a PCT, but we just couldn't spend on China. That's not relevant anymore. You have to protect your IP in China. If you don't protect your IP in China, no one's going to want to partner with you because they don't want to invest without that legal backdrop and that legal protection. Now the government policy is saying, hey, we want to be innovators in China, therefore we protect IP. They're not to the level of protection as we are in the US or other developed countries, but they're getting better. So your partners in China are going to want you to have IP protection. Control your destiny. This is kind of a catch-all to the extent that you can hold on to certain things, whether you set up your own entity in China to hold your licenses or have a third party do that. You're going to want to take steps to make sure that you don't get held in a hostage situation. So it's always smart to control your destiny. I'm just picking up the pace a little bit now. Start now. So if you've determined that it's a good commercial market for you, you've determined that you can deal with the regulatory path, it's better to start the clock ticking. We've heard of companies who say we don't want to go to China because we don't want to get copied. You don't have to go to China to get copied. If you have a really good product, you'll get copied whether you go there or not. So the best path, in our opinion, is a strong offense is a great defense. Get there first, start making a name for yourself, get brand name recognition, get KOLs using your products, and you're better off. Plus, you have a better story to tell investors when they say, what are you doing in China? And we say, this is our smart policy. We've already started, and we're going. Overarching all this is your own company's risk-reward profile. So it's your company's DNA. How much risk are you willing to take will help drive what these other considerations. So all these, I meant to say, all these considerations are interconnected. 关系， so 关系是一个中国的词，那个名字是 relationship. So relationship means people want to have a relationship to do business together. And that matters really in any country, but it's taken to a new level in China. And having a really strong relationship where you spend a lot of time together, and maybe you have a mutual friend, meaning a real friend, not a broker, but a real friend to both sides, is really helpful and important. As a side note, I hear a lot of companies go to China, they meet with potential investors, they meet with potential partners, they come back to America and said it was fantastic, everyone loved what we have, everyone wants to do business with us. The Chinese are very polite. They will never tell you your baby is ugly. They'll always say we like it. That's just the nature of Chinese. It's wonderful, but you have to meet multiple times to really know where their heads are. And if you don't end up meeting multiple times, there's really not an interest. And you won't get no, but you also might not get to a yes. So it's important to spend time together. I'm just going to take 1 minute to whip through this, which is just our experience, because I didn't really say anything about us. But we've got 3 principles. My 2 partners are Chinese. Otherwise, I couldn't do business in China. My Chinese is not good enough, and I'm not Chinese. One's a doctor. The other one comes from investment banking, and his family's in pharmaceutical and medical device distribution, which is helpful. We've invested to have our CFDA license. This burden has gone up every year. They're making it harder to do what we do. They're trying to weed out people who don't invest in their infrastructure and have enough office space and have enough storage space. So it's gotten difficult, but it's important. 8 years now, we've supported probably more than 100, but in earnest, 80 US medical device companies. We've helped one company get to 10 million in sales in China before they got bought by a multinational, Fortune 100 company with 500 employees in China, so we transferred it over to them. We've helped with cross-border investments. This is not our space. We just happen to get involved to help out with some investments of up to between 3 and 15 million. Chinese investing in US, US investing in China. We've made our own investments into device companies up to 1 million. We've helped one of our clients reduce cost of goods by over 100% by making their high-quality product FDA-approved manufacturing facility in China. And we've helped a company accelerate their operations through that Hong Kong JV into the China market. So I don't know if we have time for questions. I see the 1 minute, but these were the considerations. If someone had a question, Joe, you say if we have time for any questions.
Well, do we have any questions? And perhaps we have an entire hour to enjoy one another's company and some guanxi.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you very much, Landon. Let's hear it for Landon.